Welcome to the CURES Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness for our mind, body, and spirit. Certainly, healthy relationships are a cornerstone of our mental health. But what happens when you are in a toxic one? Will you know it? Red flags, lies, gaslighting, all signs of toxic behavior. So what do you do about it? Today in CURES, we're diving into toxic relationships with this book, Toxic Relationship Recovery, and it was written by licensed therapist and trauma specialist Jaime Mahler. Jaime, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So this is a word that I think people are becoming more aware of. We're seeing lots of hashtag toxic relationships on social media. People are talking about toxic traits. But what do we really need to understand about a partner that could be part of a toxic relationship?
Right. So if we're talking about what we need to understand kind of first and foremost is kind of the first stage is knowledge and awareness, right? I kind of work a lot of people through the stages of healing actually starts with knowledge, right? It's not just my friend told me that it was bad. It's knowing that it's bad, right? Our besties can be like, get out, red flag. But when we don't know what bad things look like, right? All of our parents fought like this. My parents threw things. Not really, but like my parents did that. They put their hands on each other. That's my normal, right? So of course, why would I think that's problematic if it's happening to me, right? So knowledge that something that is very harmful isn't normal is really the first step. A lot of people think, well, I just need to get through to my best friend, or I need to talk to that coworker and I just need to give them the information. I'm like, it really has to come from your own self-knowledge. You have to kind of do that work and understand, oh, that's not normal, right? So that's one of the first steps I'd give you guys.
Right. So and we're going to be able to take a deeper dive, which I love, but let's just talk about the beginning. Let's talk Toxic 101. What are some red flags, some toxic traits people should be looking out for?
Right. So I like to give examples. And so I'm going to give examples of, what does it look like when you're in a conflict? Let's do that right there. Right. So what does your everyday conflict style look like? Right. For some people, that's everybody shuts down and we all pretend everything's okay in 2 hours and we go get McDonald's or something or ice cream. It's like, okay, cool. That's whatever. That's not cool, but that's the style that you guys fell into. Right. Then the next style might be, oh, we always throw things and cuss at each other and we lose it. And then the end of the day, we're like, okay, just get over it, shrugs, right? So there's all these different things that start happening where we're like in these different styles and we're trying to figure out what's the normal or the healthy part of that. And so when we're really trying to like deconstruct the normalization of it, we really have to ask ourselves, what does the conflict style look like? And then what does your quote unquote peacetime look like? Right. So when I tell you, okay, so what do you like about your partner? And they're like, they have a car. Or it's not funny, but like it's like when I hear the bare minimum, I'm like very nervous for these clients, right? Because they're like, well, they have a car and I think they go to work every day and sometimes they ask me about how I am. And I'm like, okay, so that's your peaceful time, right? That's the peaceful time. And then I go, okay, so what does conflict look like? And oh, well, they cuss at me, they criticize me, they say they don't like my outfit or my hair, or they devalue me, or they mock me. I said earlier in the TV interview, public humiliation is a big thing. They bully you just like a kid would on a playground, right? These are all small little signs that add up to a very harmful relationship. And you have to go home and be like, well, I hope my bully isn't on a game or on a kick today, so I can kind of go home peacefully and go to sleep.
Wow,
right? Like
right.
that's people's normal. So that's what I would point out. I'd be like, let's deconstruct some of the peacetime and the wartime and tell me what those two things look like for you.
Yeah. So, right. If your peacetime is, well, they're just ignoring me, or they lock themselves in the bedroom, or they barely talk to me,
Yes.
when over something small. And the wartime is they might be using really abrasive language or even shoving. You're in a toxic relationship.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't even have to mince my words. Yeah.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
we don't have to even like play the game. Like that's a huge problem if that's what's going on. Yes.
And at the same time, uh, we were talking earlier, and my co-host was like, I was in a relationship and I was the toxic person. And I thought, the fact that you're calling yourself the toxic person, and I know that, and he's very open about going to therapy and he's working on himself, I feel like makes you a lot less toxic. Like, do we all have some toxic traits?
Well, yeah, and this is where it's interesting. I don't use the narcissist word. I think we were actually trying to figure it out. I don't know if I actually used that word once. I could have maybe used it in one of the examples, but I actually purposefully didn't use that word in this book. Not because that's not my specialty, not because I don't know about it. It's because sometimes words and the way we talk about ourselves become barriers to our growth, right? So we don't want to use the word narcissist. We don't want to say, oh my God, am I a narcissist? Because we're scared that's going to make it more real, right? But what I would encourage people to do is be like, hey, did the implication of your behavior harm someone? Right? And if they're like, yeah, I that lie did hurt them.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we don't have to like dehumanize you and be like, you monster, but we need to actually say, yes, that might be a harmful trait that we would want to work on. So what you're talking about, your co-host, I do believe that people that can use the right language for what's happening during these interchanges are showing signs that they're on the road to recovery, that they're on the road and the path to learning or unlearning things that were, like unlearning the harmful things and now relearning or learning in a new way, interaction points that are healthy.
So I do want to talk about narcissism. I'm going to use the N word because it is all.
Oh no, we can use narcissism.
Yeah,
I did it mainly because
I do want to talk about specifically, there's narcissism and then there's narcissistic personality disorder.
Yes.
And there's a lot of this on social media, which is a good thing. People becoming aware that it's not normal if this person is devaluing you all the time, criticizing you all the time. And the next day they're like love bombing you, giving you all this affection. But since you are a licensed therapist and you deal with trauma recovery, just break this down. Like, how do you know if you're in a relationship with the kind of narcissist that's really harmful?
Right. So the reason why we need to kind of sometimes use those bigger words, and sometimes people go, see, when you use it too much, it devalues it and people use it for everything. And I go, but these words have meaning, right? In media, we all know this, like words matter. So words do have meaning. Narcissism does have an actual category clinically on what we're going to look for. So right off the bat, if I'm going to do a simplified version, we would want to look for mechanisms of power and control and manipulation. All right. And some people are like, oh, well, I'm going to know if I'm being manipulated. Right. But there's also something called covert narcissism, which is they're using the environment to suit the manipulation. This would be the boss that tells everyone, walks around the room and says everyone's doing a good job, and then purposefully like turns a cold shoulder and ignores you, right? And now you're sitting there and you're like, wait, you just went through like 10 people and was giving them feedback, and then you got to the 11th person, which was me, and then was like, let's start the meeting, right? And so what's now happening is you think you're crazy. You're like, did I do something wrong? Like, what happened? So you go to your coworker and you go, did you guys see that? Like, they walked around to everybody and like they just literally overtly ignored me. No, they didn't. We all got feedback, Jamie. You're just overthinking this, right? So what happened right there is they used a covert tactic to demoralize you and demean you in the workplace to try to make you think you're crazy, right? And that happens a lot with narcissism, where we're using the environment to try to manipulate the system that you're a part of. So that's a family system, a work system, et cetera.
So what would it look like, say, if it's a husband and a wife, and maybe the wife is concerned that the husband is a narcissist?
Yeah, this is tricky, right? Because when you approach the chapters where I talk about the facade, I use that example. That gets a whole chapter for a reason. When you're in in a relationship with someone with narcissistic traits or they disorder, they are going to really care about the presentation of the relationship, right? So they want the smile on your face when you go outside. They want you to laugh at their jokes. They do not want you to like say anything to anyone. No, I don't. Are you talking to your best friend again? You better not be talking about me, right? It's like you aren't allowed to explore the emotional pressure that you're under because their entire premise is the aesthetic has to be pristine on the outside. So the doors are closed and yes, it's horrific. Yes, you're getting treated totally terrible and being manipulated and being gaslit and all of those things. Yet the second you walk out, right, this is where you get the friends that go, oh, wait, what do you mean you guys are separated? I love that part. I loved your partner. What do you mean? Mm-hmm. Right? They did a great job presenting. Maybe they were the comedian of the group. Maybe they were just like the person that bought drinks for everybody, right? Like they did a great job keeping up the facade, which is part of the manipulation. I'll repeat that if I have to, but it's part of the manipulation because now nobody believes you when you're like, we got back from that bar that he just dropped, or he or she, it could be anyone, but you know, in this example, let's say it's a man. He just dropped $400 and bought an entire round for the entire bar. He came back and literally railed into me for an hour and was like, you didn't laugh at my jokes. I can't believe that you're just like wearing that. You look like so-and-so, like, you know, I'm not going to swear on air, but like you look like this and that. And like, they just demoralize you and just rip you apart.
Wow.
And it's this two-faced situation.
Right.
So you feel like, who are you? Are you this person when we come back home? Or are you the person that just smiled and was on stage laughing and like buying everybody drinks? Which one do I get today?
Right.
Which is part of the narcissistic cycle. Right.
And even if you're not ready to label narcissism, these are all toxic traits. So let's say it's not so easy for people to walk away from toxic relationships. Maybe if they've been dating for a couple of months, hopefully you recognize the pattern. But sometimes it's very common, right, that people are going to wake up and realize I'm in a toxic relationship, and they might be married with kids, or they might have been together for a while, and they're not sure how to break up.
Right. I think this is the hardest part, is that we take people out of context every day. We do it to our friends. We do it to our coworkers. We do it to our sisters, our brothers, whatever. We aren't in their story. So when they're when you're seeing the traits and you're like, oh my gosh, I just caught them and it's terrible how I just heard them talking to me. Like they just threw them under the bus, whatever. And then you try to point it out, right? You're like, do you see how bad it is? And then they might be waking up to it. And they're like, yeah, I know it's not great. We're working on it. I get it, blah, blah, blah. We don't have the full story. We don't know how their relationship is played out, right? We don't know if in the behind closed doors, they said, if you ever break up with me, I'm never going to let you see the light of day. If you break up with me, say goodbye to your dog. I don't know. Maybe the dog will go missing. Maybe I'll take full custody, like threats, violence, like emotional abusive coercion. I'll call every single one of your friends. And remember that story you told me about when you were in college? Remember how you had that like affair? I'm going to call all your friends and reveal how terrible of a person you are. Like full emotional abuse, right? Like I'm going to rip you apart if you leave me, right? So of course our loved ones are like, why are you still there? And then you're sitting there and you're like, I'm doing the best I can with what I'm given. And right now I feel physically and emotionally threatened every time I move one step forward in trying to end this relationship. Right. So this is where people feel very trapped. And then they even get like another layer of like almost a low key abuse, like from their family and friends, because they're like, if you were stronger, you would have left already. And that, and you say that in the book. Not the right thing to say. Do not say that to them.
Yeah, do not practice. You have it in here. Do not practice abuser aligning. Like, it's nothing to do with how smart or strong someone is, their decision to leave. But so let's say someone's listening and they realize they're in that toxic relationship. What's step one for breaking up?
Right. Well, I would say there's a whole caveat in my book. I probably spend 4 pages on it. I do try to distinguish the spectrum we're talking about. Are we talking about physical violence? Are we talking about emotional violence? Are we talking about emotional threats, physical threats? So I spent a lot of time there. I think it's around the middle of the book. I want to say chapter 6 or 5, where I talk about the nature of how this breakup needs to go on. And it really is going to take a lot of self-reflection to see the safety that needs to surround you while the breakup is happening, right? For some people, it's emotional abuse and it's non-threatening. They're just a very, like, the person's a very traumatized person on the other end, and they're doing a lot of techniques to just rip you apart, right? So in that case, there's no threats. There's no sense of violence. You've never seen any type of like threatening behavior. That would be, let's get your friends involved. Let's get everyone to rally around you and get the supports in place to just say, okay, we know that you're about to go through this. We're going to rally around you in the next few days to kind of get you through this hard, apex of the moment, right? But if we're in the physical violence, we need to go beyond just the inner circle. We do need to add professionals. We need to seek out the domestic violence places that have in your area, in your county. Like, I have the national resources, but I'm sure this book is going to be read all over the country. So we do probably have to find those specific resources if there is anything leaning toward those threatening behaviors. So when you're like, how do they break up? You would have to really actually do an inventory of what behaviors have I seen when it's the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And if you're telling me the worst of the worst was when they said, if I can't have you, no one will. Like, that's a phrase in the book I put right there. I would say we're going to level that up to a higher spectrum. And I would say start getting the community services involved and the professionals on board. Because when I hear, if I can't have you, no one will, that is a low key homicidal threat. And so it sounds palatable, right, when I say it, but if I change those words and I translated it to what they actually were saying, they were saying, I don't think I want you to be existing if our relationship is not existing.
Yeah, and this is, so speaking again with Jaime Mahler, who is a licensed therapist, a trauma expert, and you've written the book, Toxic Relationship Recovery. I want to also say that you're a little bit different on social media. It's called @RecollectedSelf, and you've had millions of people view this as you give tips for trauma and recovery. Let's just take a moment. I want to ask you, why did you decide to write this Toxic Relationship Recovery book?
Yeah, so I really decided, it was birthed from the pain of my clients. Like, my clients really inspired me. I kept seeing a lot of that cycling, that feeling like, oh, I'm never going to get out of this. I'm never going to feel like I know who I am. I'm always going to find, my ex 2.0, I call it, right? You just keep finding the same partner and they just have a different name, right? It's not, it's like they feel like it's like, what's wrong with me, right? And they think it's like a joke. And I'm like, no, it's not a joke. It's like, it's a real part of the toxic relationship cycle, where when you find yourself interacting with people that truly think it's okay to treat you so poorly, this is partially about identifying those behaviors, right? Let's identify those strategies and skills that they're using. And then the other half of this book, so if I'm going to walk you through the trajectory, the other half of the book is really getting to understand the voices that you carry in your head, the way you interact with yourself. If you're normalizing, yeah, it's okay that they just cussed at me, right? Or I hear this a lot. I hear they just had a bad day. And that's gone on for 5 years. They just had a bad day. Every day for 5 years. And I sit there and I go, so some of the voices we're saying to ourselves is part of the normalization cycle, right? We're like, that's how relationships are going to feel for me. They're going to have a bad day every day for 5 years, and I'm going to have to endure it, right?
Or
and
try
so
to fix
part
it.
of it is like, yeah, go ahead.
Or try to fix it. Right?
Or try to fix it. Yes. And some people will absolutely be like, okay, I can lead you to the water. Like, I can kind of get the resources for you. A lot of these folks are in therapy themselves. The people that are trying to get out of these relationships, they're in their own personal growth development. And then I use the term in the book, emotionally piggybacking. We don't want someone to see their partner going through healing or personal development and being like, oh yeah, so am I, because she is or he is, right? And I go, that's not how it works. You have to take personal accountability and personal ownership of your individual healing processing in order to heal yourself, but also heal the way you're going to show up for people and the way you're going to show up in those interactions.
So let's say that step one for you is that you are thinking you're in a toxic relationship. You're even thinking that you want to leave, but there might be a lot at stake. Do you get a therapist for yourself first?
Well, it's so hard with accessibility. And I'm one of those feet on the ground therapists that I know what it's like. It's really, really difficult. So there are some people that are like, if I just get a therapist, then I'll leave. What I would say is if you really are in a place where you're like, I can't wait on a waiting list for 2 or 3 months, I have to do something now. There are ways and access points in our community. That's why there's the whole back has a bunch of resources for
Yeah.
you guys. There are resources that you don't have to be in a long-term relationship with a therapist in order to get access to these services. Okay.
Yeah.
So please, if that's a misunderstanding, please do not believe that. That's not something that has to occur in order to get out. What I would say is it's going to be beneficial to have that extra support system for you while you're exiting a relationship like this. So I will absolutely say it's a both and. Like, it is both possible for you to exit this relationship without a therapist. It's going to help you ease some of the kinks and the knots that are going to happen with that support system already in place. So I'm going to say it because I know that some people will use that as a barrier to like get out.
Yeah.
But if you are in a situation where you don't have a therapist at this moment, I would say start looking at the community resources. There's sometimes NAMI has support groups for people that have endured physical or emotional abuse. There's also the national domestic violence, like we can go and tap into those where they can get to your community resources. And many people will be like, okay, but they never put their hands on me. And this is what I'll say to anyone listening. Okay. A lot of people, when we talk about intimate partner violence or domestic violence, that's an interchangeable word now. I know it's a very heavy sounding word. We're using the V word. We're using violence, right? So many people will say, because I don't feel like someone physically violated me, like with putting their hands on me, I don't belong talking to someone in that resource center. And I would say, they know what emotional abuse looks like. They know what it sounds like. They know what it looks like aged. They know what it sounds like when you've endured years of it, right? They're gonna understand you and they're gonna validate your pain, right? So that might not be a therapist that you meet there, but they're gonna be a support system that can absolutely lead you out of this jungle of that you're in.
So, and you do have a lot of resources that people can do, even apps and even support for teens. Makes us scared as moms that we don't want our teens involved in these relationships, but you can find local resources by going to thehotline.org and look there. But I'll let people know in Connecticut, if it is a domestic violence situation, Interval House is a great resource, one of the largest in the state. This is a part in the book where I think a lot of women would identify with, why did it take so long? One of the biggest books I know with narcissism was Out of the Fog, and where people are in these relationships for about 15 years or so, and then they go, oh my gosh, I just realized. So there's a question here. Why didn't I see it sooner? Why did it take me so long? And you say the truth is sometimes the psyche's not ready.
Yeah. And so here's what I would say. When we talk about the readiness to get out of these types of situations, the amount of emotional navigation it takes, we don't inherently have a system in our culture to prepare people to have that level of emotional skill. We don't get it in elementary school, any grade school, up to our upper education. We all could have made it through college and not heard the word emotional regulation, right? Okay, so if we've all gotten through higher ed and none of us have the language to recover, then someone who's genuinely in a relationship that's this deep and complex, and you're right, maybe 15 years, they truly might not know how to explain what's happening. They just know they're miserable and they know they're cycling and they know they feel trapped, but they don't have the word codependent. Like, these might be new terms for your listeners. codependency, enmeshment, blame shifting. You talked about love bombing earlier. These might be so newer concepts. And so what I would say is, when you ask yourself, why did it take so long? I would say, did you have did anyone sit you down and give you the language for what was happening to you? Did anyone sit you down and say, what you're going through is painful and hurting you, and it's cycling back on itself, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not in that knowledge base, it's basically saying to a child, I don't know why you can't ride a bike. And someone goes, no one told me. I don't even know what a bike looks like, right? Let's say you were completely dropped on this planet. No, you didn't know anything. And they're like, why don't you know how to ride a bike, right? And you're like, well, first of all, show me what a bike looks like.
Yeah.
And second of all, can someone teach me what I'm supposed to do with this thing, right? And I go, we aren't taught this inherent conversation in relationships, in any facet of our education. And many of us have gotten the opposite education modeled to us from our parents, right? We got the opposite.
Right.
So that's where I would say it's okay to take time to heal. Slow growth is sustainable growth.
Okay.
Keep that in mind.
And there's really steps, but I want to let people know, because we have just a little less than 2 minutes left. I know it goes by quickly, but I want to leave people on a hopeful note. You can recover from a toxic relationship, and what does it look like on the other side? Do you believe that people can really have a really healthy second act?
You can recover. Yes. You can find yourself. That's what I would say. What people think is, I just need to find a new partner. I need to do this. I would say, listen, you are going to be able to find your voice, and what can happen on the other side is an exploration of who you are with a sense of freedom and not entrapment. You start looking at your relationships as things to explore and expand, and not to endure. And those people that were in your life that you felt like tolerated you no longer are going to be in your circles. You're going to be finding people that honor and celebrate you, and they actually see you for who you are. They're not trying to shape you into anything. They just care about who you are in your current self in this moment.
You know, it's a great education. The book is available on Amazon. It's also, you can go to recollectedself.com. The book is called Toxic Relationship Recovery. And you can follow at recollectedself, which is Jaime, on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for lots of free advice on trauma and toxic relationship recovery. Jaime, it's been a pleasure having you. Good luck with the book, and I hope everyone gets some great healing information from it. Thanks for being here on Kara's Cures.
Thank you so much.
And for more information on the cutting edge of wellness, you can follow me at Kara Sundlin. Have a great day and be well.